The slap echoed louder than it should have, not because of the sound itself, but because of what it represented. A sharp crack in the tightly controlled calm of a first-class cabin, slicing through polite conversation and curated smiles. Heads turned instantly. Gasps followed. Silence rushed in, heavy and stunned. Marcus Langston sat frozen in his seat, eyes wide, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and fury. His cheek burned, not just from the impact, but from the humiliation of it. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't cursed. He hadn't threatened anyone. And yet, a uniformed hand had just crossed a line that should never be crossed. The flight attendant stood over him, chest rising quickly, eyes blazing with righteous anger. Her jaw was tight, lips pressed thin, as if she believed she had just done something necessary, something justified. "Do not speak to me like that," she snapped, loud enough for half the cabin to hear. Marcus blinked once. Then again. "I didn't," he said slowly. His voice was calm, controlled, but edged with something dangerous. "I asked for your name." A ripple of whispers spread through the cabin. Phones shifted subtly in hands. Someone 2 rows back leaned into the aisle for a better view. The attendant scoffed. "You pointed your finger at me." Marcus looked down at his hand, still resting on the armrest. His finger wasn't raised, hadn't been. "I gestured," he said, "like this." He lifted his hand briefly, then set it back down. "Because you ignored me." Her eyes flicked to his tailored suit, the watch on his wrist, the polished shoes. Something unreadable passed over her face. Then her expression hardened again. "I will not tolerate aggressive behavior," she said. "Especially not from you." The words landed like a second slap. Marcus leaned back slightly, incredulous. "From me?" The purser appeared almost instantly, drawn by the tension. "What's going on here?" he asked. "She threatened me," the attendant said without hesitation. Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh. "I did not. She was afraid," the attendant insisted, pointing at herself as if that alone settled the matter. He leaned forward. He raised his voice. "I leaned forward because you were walking away," Marcus replied. "And my voice didn't rise until after you slapped me." The purser's gaze moved between them, around them. First-class passengers sat stiffly, watching. A woman clutched her purse tighter. A man shook his head, murmuring to his wife. The purser cleared his throat. "Sir, may I ask what started this?" Marcus inhaled deeply. He could feel his pulse in his neck. This moment mattered. He knew that he had lived long enough to know how quickly narratives were written for men who looked like him. "I ordered a drink," he said evenly. "She skipped my row twice. I asked her politely if she'd taken my order. She told me to be patient. When I asked for her name, she slapped me." The attendant laughed sharply. "That's not how it happened." "Oh," Marcus asked. "Then how did it happen?" "You were intimidating," she said. "You stared at me, you leaned in. You made me uncomfortable." Marcus looked around the cabin. "Did anyone see me do that?" Silenced. Then, slowly, a voice spoke up. He didn't touch her. Everyone turned. A middle-aged man across the aisle lowered his newspaper. "Was watching she slapped him. He was seated the whole time." The attendant's eyes widened. "That's not—" And he was calm. The man continued. "Right up until then." Another passenger nodded. "I saw it too." The purser straightened. "Thank you," he said carefully. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step away for a moment." The attendant bristled. "You're taking his side." "I'm assessing the situation," the purser replied. "Please." She hesitated, then stepped back, arms crossed tightly. Marcus exhaled slowly. His cheek still throbbed. But worse was the familiar weight pressing down on his chest, the knowledge that even now, with witnesses, this could still turn against him. The purser looked at him. "Sir, are you injured?" "No," Marcus said, "but I was assaulted." The word hung in the air. The purser nodded once. "I understand." Marcus glanced out the window, the tarmac stretching endlessly beneath a gray sky. 2 minutes earlier, he had been checking emails, approving a 7-figure transfer without a second thought. He was the CEO of a global investment firm. His name moved markets. But none of that mattered here. Here, he was just another black man whose calm could be reframed as menace. "I want this documented," Marcus said, "and I want her removed from interacting with me." The attendant scoffed again. "Unbelievable." Marcus met her gaze. "What's unbelievable is that you thought you could do that and walk away." The purser held up a hand. Enough, ma'am. Please return to the galley. She stormed off, heels clicking sharply against the floor. A low murmur filled the cabin. Someone whispered, "Did you see that?" Someone else shook their head. A phone camera lowered discreetly. The purser turned back to Marcus. "I'm sorry this happened," he said quietly. "We will file a report immediately." Marcus nodded. "Thank you." As the plane taxied, his phone buzzed. A message from his assistant. "Board in, okay?" He typed back slowly. "Not exactly. We'll explain later." The engines roared as the plane lifted into the air. The city fell away beneath them. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, forcing himself to breathe. He thought of his father, who had taught him early how to stay composed. How anger, no matter how justified, was often treated as guilt. How success didn't insulate you from assumptions, it just made them quieter. A flight attendant returned with a cloth and a small ice pack. Not the same one. This woman's eyes were apologetic. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said softly. "Thank you," Marcus replied. She hesitated. "For what it's worth, that shouldn't have happened." "I know," Marcus said. As she walked away, the man across the aisle leaned over. "Handled that well," he said. Marcus offered a tight smile. "I didn't have much choice." Minutes later, the purser returned. "Sir, once we land, security will meet the aircraft. A statement will be taken." Marcus nodded. He stared out the window again, watching clouds drift past, deceptively peaceful. He wondered how many stories like this never reached daylight. How many ended differently. How many men swallowed the insult just to keep moving. He touched his cheek one last time, then straightened his shoulders. This one wouldn't be swallowed. Not today. The cabin settled into an uneasy quiet after that. Not the calm silence airlines advertised, but the kind filled with unsaid things. With awareness, with people replaying what they had just witnessed and quietly deciding what they would tell themselves about it later. Marcus felt it pressing against him from every direction, a low hum beneath the engine noise. He adjusted his jacket slowly, deliberately. Every movement felt heavier now, as if the air itself expected something from him. Anger, maybe a reaction, proof of whatever fear had sparked that slap in the first place. He gave it none. Instead, he sat still, spine straight, hands folded loosely in his lap. Control had been learned early in his life, taught the way survival lessons often were not through speeches, but through watching what happened when control slipped. Across the aisle, a woman kept glancing at him, then away. Her lips pressed together each time, as if she wanted to say something and couldn't decide if it was safe. 2 rows up, a man leaned close to his wife, whispering urgently. She shook her head, eyes wide, as if even whispering felt risky. Marcus wondered, not for the first time, how different this scene would look if he had reacted the way he wanted to, if he had stood up, if he had raised his voice, if he had let the pain and humiliation explode outward instead of folding inward. He knew the answer. The purser returned again, this time kneeling beside him with a tablet in hand. His voice was quiet, professional, but there was a strain beneath it now. The kind that came when systems designed to avoid problems suddenly had to confront one. "I need to take your statement while everything is fresh," the purser said. "Is that all right?" Marcus nodded. "Yes." The purser began documenting the incident, asking careful questions. What time did it occur? Where was the attendant standing? What words were exchanged before physical contact? Marcus answered clearly, evenly, recounting every detail without embellishment. He didn't exaggerate her tone or soften his own. He described the slap exactly as it happened. Sudden, open-handed, delivered with force and certainty. As he spoke, he noticed passengers listening, not openly, but attentively. The truth had shifted the energy in the cabin. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was an incident. When the purser finished, he looked up. "Thank you. This will be escalated immediately." "Good," Marcus said. "Because this isn't just about me." The purser hesitated. "What do you mean?" Marcus gestured subtly. Toward the aisle the attendant had disappeared down. "Someone who believes that behavior is acceptable doesn't stop believing it after one flight." The purser nodded once. He didn't argue. The rest of the flight attendants avoided Marcus's row entirely. Drinks were delivered by others. Meals were placed quietly, almost reverently. As if any interaction now required permission, Marcus found the shift unsettling in its own way. Respect shouldn't arrive only after harm. As the hours passed, Marcus's mind drifted despite himself to boardrooms where his authority was unquestioned, to meetings where his voice carried weight without effort, to the strange contradiction of power, how it could be absolute in one space and meaningless in another. He thought about the assistant who had texted him earlier, unaware of what was unfolding. Thought about the irony that in less than 2 minutes, news of this incident could circle the globe if he chose to make it public. But he hadn't yet, not because he couldn't, because he was deciding how. Turbulence shook the plane briefly, rattling glasses and nerves. The seatbelt sign flickered on. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. When he opened them, he noticed something new. The woman who had slapped him stood at the front of the cabin, partially obscured by a curtain. She wasn't smiling now. Her shoulders were stiff, her jaw clenched. She spoke in low, urgent tones to another crew member, gesturing sharply. For the first time, Marcus saw uncertainty on her face. Not regret. Uncertainty. The plane began its descent. The captain's voice came over the intercom, smooth and practiced. Applause rippled weakly through the cabin when the wheels touched down. Relief mingled with tension as the aircraft slowed. Marcus didn't clap. As the plane taxied to the gate, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert, unrelated, but grounding. Markets moving, deals unfolding, the world continuing, indifferent to what had just happened 30,000 feet in the air. When the plane finally stopped, the seatbelt sign chimed off. Passengers stood quickly, eager to leave, to put distance between themselves and discomfort. Some glanced at Marcus as they passed. A few nodded subtly. One man murmured, "Sorry you went through that." Marcus acknowledged them all with the same calm nod. Security boarded before the cabin emptied. 2 officers, polite but serious, followed the purser down the aisle. The flight attendant who had slapped him stood rigidly near the galley, arms crossed, face pale. An officer approached Marcus. "Sir, we'll need to take a formal statement off the aircraft." "Of course," Marcus said, standing slowly. As he stepped into the aisle, the cabin seemed to hold its breath. He walked past the attendant without looking at her. Not out of spite, but because she no longer deserved his attention. In the jet bridge, the noise of the airport rushed in, rolling suitcases, distant announcements, the echo of footsteps. The world felt louder here, messier, realer. Marcus spoke to security again, recounting the incident once more. Each retelling felt easier, steadier. Truth had a way of strengthening itself when repeated. Finally, alone for a moment, he pulled out his phone. He didn't call his lawyer. He didn't call his assistant. He opened his camera. He stared at his reflection on the dark screen for a few seconds. His cheek showed no mark now, but he knew it didn't need one. Then he locked the phone. Not yet. As he walked toward the terminal exit, he felt something unfamiliar, but welcome beneath the exhaustion. Clarity. What had happened to him wasn't unique. That was the problem. It was familiar enough to be dismissed, routine enough to be rationalized, quiet enough to be forgotten. Unless someone refused to forget it. Marcus squared his shoulders and stepped forward into the crowd, already knowing one thing with certainty. This story would not end in silence.